Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely pumped for today's topic because we're about to decode the actual scientific, geographical, and strategic secrets behind history's most powerful rulers. We are going to strip away all the myths and legends and look at the true architecture of omnipotence. Honestly, the facts we're uncovering today, they are going to completely change how you view history. Let's get right into it.
So, what makes a ruler truly omnipotent? When we look back at the grand tapestry of human history, the titans, the emperors, the queens, the khans, we naturally have to ask ourselves, where did their world-changing power actually come from? Was it just sheer force of will? Was it some unparalleled personal genius? Or, maybe a divine right to rule? For the longest time, the go-to answer was the great man theory. Basically, this is the traditional historical belief that monumental individuals shaped the world solely through their inherent personal greatness, or some sort of divine mandate. But modern science, anthropology, and historical sociology tell a much, much more fascinating story. Because power, as it turns out, is not magic. It's an emergent property. True supremacy actually comes from mastering incredibly complex systems like physics, biology, and macroeconomics.
Section 1. Ancient Engineers of Empire, Conquering Geography with Hydrology and Algorithms.
Okay, let's dive into this by looking at how early empires dominated their environments through raw engineering. We'll start with Cyrus the Great, the founder of the massive Persian Empire in the 6th century BCE. He conquered the unforgiving, heavily arid Iranian plateau. And the absolute foundation of his power? Hydrological engineering. The Persians perfected the Qanat system, which moved water completely underground from the mountains to the arid plains. By shielding this water from intense desert evaporation, they generated a massive agricultural caloric surplus. And that surplus is literally the biological fuel of an empire. It freed up the population to serve as full-time soldiers and artisans, rather than just scraping by as subsistence farmers.
What's really interesting here is the stark contrast in the economics of occupation. The Assyrian model, for example, relied on ruling through sheer brutality and terror. But honestly, that was logistically exhausting. It required massive amounts of military energy just to constantly suppress rebellions. Cyrus, on the other hand, innovated with tolerance. When he conquered Babylon, he didn't burn it to the ground. He freed enslaved populations, he respected local customs. By using that kind of cognitive flexibility, Cyrus drastically lowered the transaction costs of his empire. He gathered willing tribute, rather than constantly bleeding resources to finance incredibly costly insurgencies.
Fast forward a bit, and we meet Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, and his algorithmic bureaucracy. First, he used topographical engineering, completing the massive Zhengguo Canal, to inject an immense caloric surplus right into his state. Second, he standardized the military. They mass-produced bronze crossbow triggers with incredible interchangeable precision. If a part broke on the battlefield, boom, you just swapped it out. Third, he standardized society itself. Everything from weights to written script, right down to the exact width of cart axles to reduce friction on the roads. He essentially treated human society like a programmable, highly efficient machine, very similar to how modern code optimizes our supply chains today.
Section 2. Climate, Geography, and Wealth, Riding Meteorological Anomalies and Monopolies.
So how exactly does a ruler maintain absolute control over vast distances without any modern communication technology? Well, Augustus Caesar was an undeniable master politician, for sure, but he also had a silent, incredibly powerful ally. Around 200 BCE, this unusual meteorological anomaly kicks in, known as the Roman climatic optimum. The global climate became exceptionally warm, stable, and humid. When Augustus took power in 27 BCE, he basically rode this massive environmental wave. This climate blessing pushed the boundaries of viable agriculture way further north and absolutely skyrocketed crop yields. Augustus capitalized on this by building a frictionless maritime logistics network, seamlessly feeding 1 million citizens in Rome with grain shipped right across the Mediterranean.
Let's pivot and shift our geographic focus over to West Africa in the 14th century. Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire, controlled a staggering 50% of the Old World's total gold supply. He's widely cited as the wealthiest human being to have ever lived. But think about it for a second. Gold has absolutely no intrinsic biological value. You can't eat it. Its power is derived entirely from fiat consensus, this shared psychological delusion where we all just collectively agree that a shiny piece of metal has immense value. And Musa, he mastered this psychology perfectly.
But Musa didn't just rely on the gold. He controlled a massive structural trade bottleneck. He had all the gold from the south, yes, but he also firmly controlled the salt from the north. And unlike gold, salt is biologically vital for human cellular function and for the chemical preservation of meat. By systematically taxing the exchange of these two resources, Musa accumulated just unimaginable capital. In fact, he had so much wealth that during his 1324 pilgrimage to Mecca, he spent so much gold in Cairo that he inadvertently caused catastrophic hyperinflation. He literally had so much money that he completely tanked the entire regional economy for over a decade just by going on vacation.
Section 3. The Biological Conquerors, Apex Predators of the Anthropocene.
Now, was a figure like Genghis Khan merely a tactical brute? Or was he an apex predator perfectly positioned to ride a massive environmental wave? For centuries, history attributed his success almost entirely to his sheer ruthlessness. But modern tree ring data tells a completely different story. Right after Genghis unites the tribes, a pluvial anomaly hits between 1211 and 1225 CE. This brought unprecedented extended rainfall to the normally arid Asian steppe. And what does rain mean in the steppe? It means a massive explosion of grassland biomass. That grass was the literal biological fuel needed to support millions of horses, allowing Mongol armies to travel up to 100 miles in a single day.
And this brilliantly illustrates how they paired that biological fuel with a terrifying technological edge. The Mongol composite recurve bow wasn't just a weapon. It was an absolute masterpiece of medieval materials science. It used a wooden core framed by animal horn on the belly to resist compression and animal sinew on the back to resist tension, all intricately bound together by animal glue. This perfect structure allowed mounted warriors to store tremendous elastic potential energy and fire armor-piercing arrows while riding at a full gallop.
But as you might expect, this level of absolute power had a horrifying side effect. Genghis Khan united the Eurasian steppe through efficient meritocracy and, of course, the strategic, psychological use of terror. In doing so, he created the Pax Mongolica, a frictionless transcontinental trade network, but inadvertently, this exact network became a biological superhighway. Fleas carrying the Yersinia pestis bacteria traveled these very routes all the way from Asia to Europe, triggering the Black Death. The Mongols' sheer logistical mastery fundamentally altered the genetic and historical trajectory of Western civilization forever. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. The Industrial Leviathan, the shift to abstracted power. All right, how did someone like Queen Victoria rule a quarter of the Earth's land surface and 400 million people without ever personally commanding a single army on the battlefield? The answer is a profound thermodynamic shift. For 10,000 years, empires ran on biomass, human and animal muscle, entirely restricted by agricultural crop yields. But the British Empire under Victoria finally broke this Malthusian trap. The Industrial Revolution meant that empires were now powered by fossilized sunlight, the raw kinetic output of coal. A single steam engine could suddenly output the continuous energy of hundreds of laborers, creating just a massive, unprecedented disparity in global energy utilization.
To manage this sprawling, abstracted power, the British basically weaponized science itself. They used quinine, isolated from tree bark, as an epidemiological shield against malaria, which allowed their soldiers to survive and operate in deep tropical climates. They mastered thermodynamics with steam engines, letting them project kinetic power across vast oceans. And perhaps most importantly, they harnessed electromagnetism with the telegraph. The empire functioned almost like a giant planetary organism. London was the brain, and those underwater copper telegraph wires were its global neural network, transmitting data at the absolute speed of light.
Which brings us to Section 5, the equation of true power, mastering the complex system.
So the crucial point is this. When we look at the entire sweep of history through this scientific lens, the whole illusion of the solitary great man or great woman just completely fades away. True power is deeply contingent. It really is an emergent property. History's greatest rulers didn't rely on magic or just good luck. They were grand conductors of the physical sciences. They engineered hydrology and thermodynamics. They capitalized on climatological anomalies like the Roman warm period or the Mongolian rains. They implemented sociological algorithms and standardization to eliminate friction in their empires. And they heavily leveraged the sheer gravitational pull of macroeconomics while utilizing epidemiological shields.
They recognized the profound levers of power that nature and physics laid before them, and they pulled them with unrelenting force. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly profound thought from our source material. Power, ultimately, is not given by the gods. It is engineered. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder today.
who in our modern world currently holds the technological tools to engineer the next era of global power? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.
Please like and subscribe.